Good morning. My name is Mike Pate. I'm the project director for the Town and Gown project, and we're delighted to have you with us this morning to share a few minutes. I want to talk for a few minutes first about some of the things that are already going on with TAG, and then Sam Assefa will join us to talk about what's going on in Boulder, Colorado. But I wanted to just share with you some of the things that we've looked at in the past, because one of the things that we recognized was anytime someone starts a new project, one of the first things that they are asked is this really a problem, or isn't somebody else doing this, or how can you expect to make this project successful in this community? As we examined the opportunities surrounding town and gown relations in Tallahassee, we tried to keep that thought in mind and keep those questions in mind, and we've tried to make sure that we have logical and effective answers for all of them. It's important to recognize that there are already some very good things going on in our community in town and gown relations. For example, Florida State, Florida A&M, and Tallahassee Community College are collaborating on the widely acclaimed 7 Days of Opening Nights Arts Festival. And the Advanced Manufacturing Training Center at Tallahassee Community College is an example of a great partnership between TCC and the Economic Development Council. Leon County has partnered with Florida State to create one of the finest cross-country tracks in the country at Appalachia Regional Park. And Bing Energy announced it's moving its corporate headquarters and production facilities to Tallahassee as a result of collaboration between Florida State University, the City of Tallahassee, Leon County, the Economic Development Council, and the state of Florida. So we can see that there are some things that are already happening that give us an excellent opportunity to build on successes we've already had. But in order for any project to be successful, it must have funding. In our case, we have had a broad collection of organizations and businesses that have agreed to fund this project. Most important among those are the colleges and governmental entities that were willing to step forward to commit both funding and staff time to the project. I also want to thank the representatives of our business community who invested in the project during what have been extraordinarily difficult times for businesses in our community. We've now raised over $180,000 from more than 30 sponsors, and we continue to work on finalizing the funding for the project, and we'll be adding additional names to this list. And I'd like to call your attention to the fact that this slide is wrong, because unfortunately I had a little foul up in getting things moved from one program to another, and this is the old slide. The new list of sponsors is on the sheet of paper that you have on the TAG Tallahassee, so it includes all of the 30-plus sponsors that we have, and I would appreciate if you'd take a look at that list and make sure you know who's on there, and tell those folks thanks for their support of the Town and Gown project. There are 4 phases to the TAG Tallahassee project. In phase 1, we surveyed a broad segment of the community by phone and conducted personal interviews with key leaders to gain an understanding of exactly how the community perceives town and gown relations in Tallahassee. We are now in phase 2. We held a town hall forum to present the data from the surveys, and today marks the first of a series of forums that will present best practice examples from other college communities that Tallahassee could consider to improve our town and gown relations. And in phase 3, our Board of Advisors will come together to evaluate the data from the surveys, input from the best practice forums, and feedbacks from residents of the community. And from that information, we'll develop a process for Tallahassee that will find ways to sustain collaborative conversation about town and gown issues. And finally, in phase 4, the board will select some specific projects based on what we have learned. Residents of our community will be invited to serve on the project teams that will work on the projects identified from the research. And those project teams will then devise specific responses to either improve or resolve the identified project. Following the town hall forum to share the results from the data on community perceptions of town and gown relations, our board selected the 5 best areas of opportunity that Tallahassee could consider as we go forward. Those are, first of all, environmental partnerships. We are looking for town and gown partnerships that address both broad issues of environmental concern. And today you will be hearing about how the City of Boulder and the University of Colorado created a process for discussing environmental partnerships and finding ways to collaborate to make their community better. The second was communications. One of the things that has become very clear from our research is that communications is a real key to solving the riddle of how to build better town and gown relations. We looked for partnerships that have found ways to improve the communications between town and gown so that each knows much more about what the other is doing. Our Q&A at our town hall forum on the research led to several questions that made it clear that the community doesn't know about all of the things that the colleges and universities do, and vice versa. As a result of that interest, I am pleased to announce to you today that the University of Oregon and the City of Eugene will be coming to Tallahassee on October 20th to share their best practices in communications between the City of Eugene and the University of Oregon. The third area of opportunity is in economic development partnerships. We're interested in identifying town and gown partnerships that focus on finding ways to use university research to create new businesses in our community. We want to know more about how we can create partnerships between the universities and our local governments to make it easier for the university researchers to start businesses in our community rather than simply selling their patents to companies in other places. We're in final discussions with the City of San Jose and San Jose State University to determine the date that they will come to Tallahassee to talk about their partnerships. Fourth is public safety issues. And here we're looking for a town-gown partnership that focuses on broad public safety issues. We think we found that best practice at Virginia Tech and the town of Blacksburg. We are in final discussions with them to select a date that they will come to Tallahassee to share their best practices in the area of public safety. And the fifth is student engagement. One of the things that has become clear in our studies and previous community studies that have been done is that few students are engaged at all in our community. Excuse me. We found that their sphere of influence is within a quarter mile around the campuses, and we're still looking to try to find that best practice example that will work most effectively and successfully to make this an area of focus for us. So as you can tell, we've been working very diligently to select the 5 college towns that have been and will be invited to present their best practices in town hall forums in Tallahassee. All of the town forums, including the session today, are being recorded for rebroadcast on the City of Tallahassee TV station, Leon County Schools TV station, and the stations of Florida State, Florida A&M, and Tallahassee Community College. The videos will also be available on our website at the Village Square, on our webpage at the Village Square website, and on our Facebook page, Tag Tallahassee. So we're looking forward to completing this phase of the project and moving ahead to the third and fourth phases. And when we asked about the project, FSU President Eric Barron, who is with us today, thank you, Eric, for coming this morning. Well, now I lost my place, too. Give me just a second here, I apologize. But Eric, when we talked to Eric about the project, he stated that he is, and this is a quote from Eric Barron, he is excited by the opportunity that the Town Hall Relations Project presents to forge a strong bond with our neighbors in the local community. We face many of the same challenges, but we also share many of the same opportunities. This initiative will serve as an important reminder that our futures are inextricably linked and that we work best when we work together. And that's the close of that quote. We are fortunate that President Barron, along with President Ammons, President Murdaugh, Mayor Marks, and Chairman Daley have such clear visions of the importance of this project in the community. And the good news is that we have had some early successes. For the first time that I know of, the superintendent of our school system and the presidents of Florida State, Florida A&M, and Tallahassee Community College have started meeting to discuss how they can work together. The mayor and the chairman of our county commission and the 3 presidents held the first of what they all agreed should be regular meetings to report directly to each other on what they are doing and to look for ways they can work together. All 5 of the key stakeholders have appointed representatives from their organizations to work with TAG and with other organizations to begin discussions on how the community can work together more effectively. With these steps forward, I can state that even if nothing else were to happen except the implementation of these 3 ideas, TAG Tallahassee must be considered a success. But our goals are broader and our opportunities are greater. And we look forward to additional successes that will define our community as an even better place to live and work. Now we begin that process by introducing you to our speaker today. He is Sam Assefa. Sam is the Senior Urban Designer for the Department of Community Planning and Sustainability for the City of Boulder. Previously, he worked in Chicago, where he was Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Richard Daley. Sam also worked for the City of San Francisco and serves on several local and national boards and is taught at the California College of the Arts. I met Sam at the International Town and Gown Association Conference in June, where he was leading a charrette on how to explore revitalization efforts for Boulder's University Hill Commercial District. He led a great program there, and I'm confident that he's going to do the same for us today. His presentation today will talk about how the City of Boulder and the University of Colorado have created a shared set of sustainability principles that have strengthened their partnerships. So please join me in a big Tallahassee welcome, even though we are in Destin, for Sam Assefa. Sam?
Thank you, Mike. And thank you for having me here. I have to say, I've never been to Tallahassee. But last night, I think I met, I don't know, probably about 30 or 40 Tallahasseans, I guess. And what an incredible group of people. Genuinely, as well as quite a bunch of characters as well. I think any one of them could perform well at Second City in Chicago. But truly, what interesting thing that I noticed was the incredible association with the city, and that there's an amazing, I guess, love or, I don't know, attachment that I haven't seen in most other places, but I have in Boulder, and it's a very interesting comparison. So the people of Boulder, even after they live there for about a year or two, get this incredible attachment to the city, and immediately the whole culture starts to protect, what's wonderful about the place, and an amazing, amazing amount of civic engagement, and I grew up in 6 countries, 3 continents, 4 cities. Boulder amazed me from that sense, where there's an amazing amount of engagement about the civic or the place that Boulder is. Let's see if I can find a slide. So what I wanted to share today and talk about town and gown relationships and what lessons from Boulder. I thought, discussing with Mike, one of the tie that binds the university and the city and the citizens is really sustainability. Most of you know, and I've used Boulder as an example in my other practices, lessons from best practice examples about sustainable planning, sustainable policies, environmental protection. Interestingly, historically, both CU, Colorado University, and the city itself have had that parallel history, both being pioneers in environmental issues. And there was already a built-in relationship or what I started calling a sweet spot between the two, the city and the town. So what I want to talk about is how that actually evolved over time and what are the kinds of collaborations and examples that currently are bringing CU and the university together. Just a brief background, the city, the university is a significant part of the city of Boulder, almost 100,000 people, 38,000 staff and students make up that 100,000 population. So already there is, it's almost, over a third of the population is in the university. So there is, they have to work together as a result of that. And the impact that the university has on the city, both economically, socially, and environmentally, is huge. It's the largest user of the power grid, as well as water and a number of other natural resources. I mentioned briefly, historically, Boulder has been really attached to this, its environment and climate. And there has been, over the last 50 years, significant focus on how you protect that, what is wonderful about the city, the mountain, the backdrop, and significant amount of public involvement. It's a city that voted to tax itself so that they could buy the surrounding open space and protect it from being sprawl, a place for sprawl. As the city grows, they wanted to protect and be an example for the rest of that region. This is a map of Boulder. The city proper is all of the green. The city has a growth boundary called the Blue Line that it established in the 1950s that outside of that, there's no city service, no water, electricity, but they also bought the mountain in the surrounding area so that it is protected. So everything that happens in Boulder has to happen within that compact 25 square mile area as a dense infill urban development for its future growth. It's also a city that believes that you can do anything with zoning, including world peace, as this bumper sticker implies. But the interesting, the political system is very interesting as well. And what I learned is, so everyone has opinions there, and they believe theirs is the right one, and they argue to death. And all of it really has to do with this wonderful backdrop of nature that it has, that people are attracted to, and it's about protecting that environment. So when I started practicing there, the first thing I thought is, God, this city actually needs an urban design that is worthy of its natural setting. And that's one of the greatest assets that the city has that definitely attracts a lot of people, and most importantly now in this economy, attracts what Richard Florida calls the creative class, the young and educated and entrepreneurs. So just quick milestones over the last 50 years. The Blue Line was established in '59. This is the boundary that I talked about. Actually, a couple of citizens got together and they said, and at that time the population I believe was maybe about 19,000, but they had a fear of population increase and the loss of that natural environment. Today, that protection is paying back significantly to the city, both economically and environmentally. Tax for open space, 1970, it established the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. There was an agreement with the county to jointly create a comprehensive plan for Boulder that is updated every 5 years. And they look at that, and the city, we do as well as the citizens. It's almost like the Bible. Everybody reads the comprehensive plan. People who are involved in any city decision, or when they come for a planning review, they come prepared and they read every word in the comprehensive plan. And when you do prepare the comprehensive plan, it is a very, very arduous process, because every word that you put in there has a significant value. Again, I've had practices in planning in different cities. I've never seen a city that really respects and uses that. I mentioned CU, Colorado University. Again, since the 1950s, it had significant milestones in environmental stewardship as well as programs within its institution. And to this day, currently, they're updating their master plan parallel with the city's master plan, and sustainability and environmental protection are a central part of that. This is a quote from Richard Florida, again, the author of The Rise of the Creative Class. He links, Boulder's, CU's talent as an important component of the city's success, and vice versa, the city's success as a green, sustainable place, attracting again, what he calls the creative class. I believe this is, especially in economic competitiveness, and a most critical thing as we move forward as cities compete for talent. Organization at CEOs for Cities out of Chicago about 4 or 5 years ago did a study and looked at 2/3 of college-educated 25 to 34 years old choose place first and then look for jobs. That is a huge shift from the industrial age, where you actually go where the jobs are. Even with this economy, there is still some significant evidence, at least in Boulder, becoming I think the #1 city in the last 3 years for startup companies and businesses. Significant amount of young people are attracted to that place. Most of it has to do with a great place that it is as a sustainable, livable, a green place. And there's evidence now throughout the country that the creative class, or the young and educated, are attracted to these places for the sustainable policies. 11 of Florida's top 15 creative index cities are also among the top in sustainability and the most LEED certified, leadership in energy and environmental design. LEED certified buildings are found in those areas. These happen to be places where it's easy to bike, walk, take the bus, and have 24-hour activities. That's the attraction that is bringing, again, the creative class or the young and educated to those places. As a city policy, we actually focus a lot on that, which is how do we retain CU students that are coming out of there into the city? Our policy on urban design is predicated in some form or fashion to that as well. How do we work with CU to make sure that students actually are not going to Tallahassee? Or how do we get FSU students to come live in Boulder? So that kind of competitiveness. But it's the same thing that Mike was talking about, the 7 days of opening nights, or the Knights Creative Communities Institute. Those kinds of activities are very important for retaining FSU students within Tallahassee. It's a great investment to have students go through that process in the university, and then you lose that when they're going to New York, LA, or somewhere else. It is a city policy in the city, both in the economic development aspect of it, department, but also in planning, to really discuss about what do we need to do to retain, and then understand what it is that that group or CU students in the university needs. Where we found a really a fitting kind of, call it sweet spot around environmental issues, and sweet spots as it relates to what the goals and objectives of the Colorado University is and are, and what the city's objectives are. And we try to find the right matches and sweet spots to nourish that and actually develop that over time, instead of just focusing on some of the problems. Because as you know, town and gown problems often have to do with students are coming in, they're there for 4 years, 5 years, they don't have invested interest in the city, they leave. The neighbors who've grown up there for many years there's usually some frictions around alcohol issues, noise issues. Those are real issues, and those are service areas that we have. We have different kinds of programs that tries to mitigate that, but lately we've been looking at it and flipping that around and saying, where should we focus on the sweet spots where we have actually be able to leverage the strength of each, the city and the university. So a lot of the work that the city has done, and actually has been a pioneer in terms of sustainability, transportation is a key component of that. Significant reduction in private auto use. That's part of what is attractive to young college-educated students and CU as well. It has close to now 13% of mode transportation is on bikes in the city. Significant amount of bike paths and underpasses to make it easier to get around within the city. A number of areas in terms of being a pioneer as a great place to move around. 62% of downtown people who work in the downtown use bus, walk, or bike to work. That is not only a quality of life in terms of environmental impact, congestion, and all that, but it is also a good economic policy, and it's seen again in the rise of Boulder over the last 4 or 5 years, especially in attracting a lot of entrepreneurs and young people. As we focus, especially now and then in the future, again, this is a map of the city. We're trying to look at, because we're focusing a lot on infill development rather than sprawl, we have a growth boundary. This is currently most of the density of the city is what is on the western half of the city. The eastern half, which traditionally it still is industrial, is where the projected growth is just in the future. You could see that map for where housing is expected to grow, and the same thing for employment. Significant amount of the focus is on the eastern part of the city. that also happens to be where CU will be expanding its research facilities and its campus. And in terms of urban design, that is also where the eastern part of the city is very much unlike the western part. It's referred to in Boulder as the tale of two cities. So Folsom Street kind of halfway in the city. On the left, you have this fine-grained, walkable, livable, attractive urban neighborhood, the Pearl Street Mall. The blocks are smaller, it's easy to walk. The east part of the city may as well be any other part of the US. Significant amount of large blocks. It's not connected, it's not walkable. So as the population is going to be expanding in that area, and especially as CU's East Campus, it's called, is planning to expand, the city policy and working with CU, we're looking at how do we bring what works best in the western part of the city for the future in the eastern part of the city. A lot of it has to do with urban planning, design, and coordination with that. So we hold workshops with CU, their planning facilities, to look at the eastern part of the city where they can actually influence their master plan, which they actually are doing now. We're working on a program called Sustainable Streets and Centers to really think about what works in the western part of the city and how do we focus that on the east. In one hand, we're working with the master planners and with the city administration. The other critical part of it, nurturing citizenship in a sense, is how do the university students get engaged in that activity. So we're working last year with a whole program in the architecture program, significant amount of students looking at the eastern part of the city as a way to create a sustainable urban form and urban design guidelines. We go and have a lot of relationship with the city, with the students who are making that as part of their curriculum now. And the interesting thing is if you plan and design and work in the neighborhoods, they go out and meet neighborhood groups, they go to organizations, they come to the city council and testify. You're trying to build that citizenship and invest in the students invest their time in the city so that when they get out of there, it's not only, they know better about the city instead of just what they're learning at school, but there's more chance that they could actually have ownership and citizenship beyond the school. What I talked about earlier is the eastern part of the campus. The main campus, which is up at University Hill, Mike mentioned the design charrette as town and gown. This is a diagram or an aerial photo that shows literally just like the tale of two cities that I showed from an urban design perspective. This also has that kind of separation. So here's the CU campus. You have Broadway is a major thoroughfare. And then the University Hill neighborhood, very established neighborhood. Historically, that was where students partied in the 60s and 70s, but you also have citizens who live there. And there has been for some time friction between the residents there and the university. The bars at 2 o'clock in the morning are filled with kids, people trashing sofas and throwing out sofas and furniture out on the street, alcohol, and some of the crime issues. Boulder doesn't have that much crime, but the most crime is usually within the University Hill area. So it was a lot of tension. So we're trying to turn that around and really look at the positive aspects of it. Instead of just focusing on alcohol, what about focusing on the innovation aspect of the city, the university, and bring that as one of the tools of sweet spots, what I called earlier. So the International Town and Gown Conference last year, which we hosted with CU and Boulder, was a good venue to really investigate this idea. So instead of focusing on the alcohol and all the other issues here, why not think about the place where, Broadway, instead of dividing the two sides, and then the streets and the public space, that could be where the creative forces of the university could come together with the neighborhood needs and start programs that actually link the two. So at the conference, initially the idea is here, you're looking at an alley, and across there is the university. That would be across Broadway. What if we have students and the university focus on the public streets as a place where actually creativity and the neighborhood can come together? So we started discussing about programming alleys and streets instead of just as a place for cars. That's where the architecture students could design structures with the dance studio at CU and come up with programs that actually write a play to be performed on the sidewalk, on the street, regularly every year. And that's where the neighborhoods can come actually and sit and enjoy and look at the creative aspects of and energy of the students. So we framed that design charrette or design workshop around that issue. We closed the street for a whole day. We actually had hosted the International Town and Gown participants on the streets. When we were discussing that, instead of having it a one-day event, and this is where it's really important to have an institutional structure for something to continue. We talked to the university and we said, it shouldn't be just a one-day event of a design charrette. What if the university actually owns it in their curriculum? So there's a program called the Maymester that it's a 3-week intense course in the summer from May to June. So we use that as a launching point. So that Maymester course focused on a new program that the students will look at every year, transforming a public space like a street into a place of celebration, innovation, creativity. So this year, very intensely working the 3-week course, students came up with a number of ideas, including the furniture that is designed for that day for the charrette that really encourages dialogue, and there are a number of other pieces there. They also came up with a number of ideas about intervening within the neighborhood. So they created these hammocks, and they went out throughout the neighborhood and found wonderful public places or streets or parks and installed these hammocks, and then they digitized them in terms of their location for GPS, and they put a website for people to click. And if you want a place where you want to just have quiet place, take a nap on a hammock on an alley where you'll see that, and you could go and hang out on the hammock, or if you want to sunbathe, or if you want to watch people. So they put that out. It was fantastic, actually. On that day, one of the students came to me when we were doing the charrette. It was on the front page of the newspaper. Our hammocks are out. It's a success. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. Before they did that, they asked the instructor if it is legal to do that, and should they ask the city for permit. And he said, well, if you think the answer is going to be yes, sure. If you think the answer is going to be no, I'll leave it up to you. So they installed, I believe it was about 10 or 15. An hour after the charrette, the same kid came up to me and he said, I just heard that the city took down a bunch of them that we hang out. I said, why? He said, well, we didn't have any permit. I said, well, there's nothing I could do about it. But it was really interesting. Here's a city-sponsored event, this relationship. But they're doing it out illegally. But what we wanted to do is have the dialogue and the conversation. Actually, they were received very positively by the neighbors, but the city the park district and others, they have to go by the rules. But that starts the conversation. Well, if students want to intervene in a place like that, that is really in a positive way, we should actually start looking in a different way about our laws that get in the way of that kind of creativity or anything that could actually help bring the two sides together. As part of that discussion in a very wonderful facility within, again, University Hill and poetry bookstore, I think it's one of 2 in the country that's dedicated for poetry. Apparently, a lot of students from CU now go there because they love that place. So we engaged that organization as well to be part of this, and they had poetry reading out on the street. Again, the same idea of focusing on the creativity of the students and the and as a source for bringing the two sides together. I think that evening, I think Mike was there that day, but that evening, we continued that activity where this creative way to have dance and paint, we called it the footprints of jazz, salsa, and there was one more, where we put out a canvas, paint. I think for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood people who actually lived there brought their kids in an event that is open on the street. And it was very highly received, where they started looking at, here's students, and we did get some of, I'll talk briefly about, it's a program called Growing Up in Boulder. It's a kids program at CU. We got them involved to do all these creative activities. That started to bring to light, the positive aspect of what the university brings for long-time residents within the University Hill. The Growing Up Boulder program that is housed at CU is one area that the city is collaborating in a number of ways with them. So they work with area kids and students within the university structure to really think about how kids think about the future, especially around planning issues. The director of planning in Boulder, David Driscoll, he's also the chair of the UNESCO chair for Growing Up in Cities, which is a more international organization which does similar activities where kids need to be informed about their environment, but most importantly, they should actually inform the planners in terms of what their environment ought to be when they grow up. So the kids from Growing Up in Boulder actually do come to City Hall. They come to the master plan review process, or when we're creating updating the master plan, we get them involved to come and actually express their ideas. It's not just statements, but they have thought about it, and they really talk about what it is that they expect the city planners and decision makers ought to do. So the CU has that program. The city, David sits as a part of the board of directors, again, building that relationship with the university. Just quick, another collaboration between CU and Boulder is the Boulder Innovation Center, which is out of CU. The city actually was a co-founder. It's an institution that is serving as a catalyst to link the research activities that come out of the university. So faculty members are not the best in terms of business. So this provides a service to commercialize the technology and the research that's coming out of the CU, both with the Leeds School of Business and the Economic Vitality part of the city's planning department works with them to link with jobs and some of the new entrepreneurs in the city to make a link between the students that are coming out of there and actually creating jobs. The city manager sits on the board of directors on that, and the Boulder Innovation Center. The city also contributes $30,000 annually to that program. Again, jointly programmed activities such as this are help on the lasting relationship between the university and the city. Since its inception in 2006, we've seen a significant benefits economically to the city and certainly to CU as well. Significant increase in jobs that are created, revenues, and we see that with now significant amount of entrepreneurs coming to the city, there's going to be an important role for Boulder Innovation Center to actually make that even more of a success. So just to conclude, I think what really worked for CU is I talked about the shared set of sustainability principles that CU historically and Boulder historically had. That helped. When we talk about best practices, you can't apply what happens in one city to another, but there are some lessons that actually could help. What are the links with FSU, for example, in Tallahassee? What are the sweet spots that we could actually focus? And I mentioned a couple of them, that the 7 days of opening nights, things like that. Small things done well could actually help build that relationship for success in the future. Process is important. When we were updating our master plan for the city, which is updated every 5 years, we almost made it parallel to that. CU was updating its master plan. So we have panels on the CU's sustainability task force that are from the city and vice versa. So in that process, having an early input in CU's master plan, so because it's a state university, it doesn't have to technically abide by city code, but because they're good citizens and through early process, we actually see the mutual benefits of what the city's zoning and sustainability policies are and how that is actually could be leveraged for the city, for CU as it's expanding. They're very different societies, right? So the students are there for 5 years and they're gone, and the Boulder citizens are different. Really understanding that and then leveraging where those differences actually help both the city and the university. So for example, I talked about transportation. We're significantly focusing on making it much easier and easier for CU students to get around. It not only improves our economy and environment, but it is very attractive for CU to have they market that when they try to attract students, how it's easy to get around, free bus service, and the CU pays it, and for the students, and the city provides the bus services specifically, sometimes at midnight, late into the night, so that students don't have to drive. I mentioned jointly funded programs. There's also a jointly funded liaison between the CU and Boulder. There's a person who sits in the city manager's office. She's paid half by the CU and half by the city, and her job is to link all the interests between the two institutions. Communication is a key part of that. How do the students know what the city is doing? So that liaison position, funded position, is a critical and important part of it. Building relationships, I think there's no substitute to that. In the last 5 years, there has been a significant increase in the relationship between CU and Boulder, partly because the former city manager, Frank Bruno of the city, became the vice provost of the university for administration. And he literally took that to another level in terms of the two relationships. And finally, having beer together actually does help with the different individuals. So that's kind of in general. I hope happy to take questions. I know you've been patient in listening to that. These are the main reasons why the two are connected well together. And we have already seen some of the benefits in some of it was free labor, where I get a lot of interns from CU. But it's an important part of, for them to learn about, they can stay in the city. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. Yes.
Thank you, Sam. Am I on? Yeah, there we go. Let me first of all thank Sam for taking the time to join us today. I know that all of you got a lot out of what he's had to say. The good news is we do have a few minutes for questions, and we'd be happy to take any of those. Sam, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about to sort of get that started was you mentioned the dedicated position that the city has. That, as I understand, that is jointly funded by CU and the city. Do you know any of the background about how that got started and why it came about, and how the city and the university got to that point?
My understanding, actually, a while back, I mentioned a bit of the friction that existed at University Hill, and there was a significant need around safety issues primarily, and that there was a need to actually beef up the relationship. And at that point, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, the new city manager established that position, and CU accepted it. And I mentioned Frank Bruno being at the university actually helped build the support for that. And currently, she has an office at CU and at the city manager's office. And there was a need primarily from lack of communication, mostly in terms of what happens in the city, around safety issues. And that turned more into the economic development later, that's my understanding. But initially, it had to do with the mitigating a lot of the friction that existed. Yes?
Would you mind talking about how the business community of Boulder gets involved with this, or if they've been involved?
In terms of with the CU. So there are two parts to it. One is a lot of the research that's taking place at CU is coordinated by the BIC, Boulder Innovation Center. That is they have relationships, I believe, over 75 or 80 businesses in the city that they actually go and look at their needs, what they're looking for, and get the right people from the business with the right people in the research institutions or the students that are coming out of it. Almost, close to 80 businesses are involved in that. Downtown Boulder, Inc. is it focuses mostly on the downtown area, but it has a significant, it knows that CU has a significant impact, so they have a number of programs to mostly sort of show support in the Stampede, the Pearl Street Stampede. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So 5-6 times a year for CU football, a day before the Friday before the CU football game, the downtown Pearl Street Mall turns into this wonderful festival that's sponsored by Downtown Inc. to show support for the football team, but that's part of also building relationship with CU. So they have their marching band come on Pearl Street and have a number of festivities and discussions. So that is sponsored by the Boulder Business Downtown Inc. Yes?
If you could maybe explain a little, we have multiple young professional organizations throughout the town, and if you could maybe explain if you guys, collaborate with your young professional organizations or make recommendations on how we can do such with like the Chamber's Access Tallahassee program.
Yeah, in the city department, it's called Economic Vitality, EV, and the person who's there, Elizabeth Hansen, one of her work is actually to look at a lot of the entrepreneurial organizations and younger people who oftentimes they're mostly in the coffee shops, and really getting their voices heard within the, certainly within the city, but connecting, the big part of it is connecting them to the right institutions or resources within the city and some of the incentives as well. There aren't, that I'm aware of, significant organizations within the city that could be a model as young entrepreneurs. Most of it does happen through CU's, the initiative programs at CU, the business initiative program. And then the city focuses a lot more now than ever on getting younger entrepreneurs to come to Boulder, but the ones that are there to stay, finding expansion spaces. That's kind of one of the bigger challenges there. Having it, because the city doesn't grow widely, finding large, they have small scale 2,000, 3,000 square foot space is needed for some of the startups. So the EV department goes around and really taps into this, the groups to see what their needs are. And now we're changing some of the zoning in the city to actually accommodate some of the obstacles that some of the startup businesses have. And so does that answer the question? Thanks. Yes, please.
Do you have any sense at all on how you're able to retain graduate students, master's degree students, and PhDs in and around Boulder, in and around, I forget the county that Boulder sits in.
Boulder County, yeah.
Boulder County, and in the corridor, say, between Denver and Boulder. The reason I'm asking the question, there are some in our higher education community that would suggest a real thriving economy happens when you're able to create an environment where your graduate students stay
That's a very good point, because that has been discussed a lot lately within the city as well. I know FSU, when Mike was telling me, there's a very low percentage of retention here in Tallahassee. I don't know the number for CU, but my sense is it's high. The city itself has a significant amount of internship programs, and at many different levels. So that's kind of one venue that the city uses to link interns, especially in the third and fourth year, as kind of a stepping stone. And they also link them, so the EV department has at least 3 or 4 intern programs for people who are coming out of CU. And their work is specifically doing some research about retention, where the gaps are in terms of the needs of the CU students that are the CU graduates, and where the disconnect is with some of the businesses that are actually looking for talent. So a number of them, I know just in the last year, 2 or 3 of them have stayed in Boulder out of the 4 that came as interns to the EV department. So I think that's a great venue, and I've had this discussion yesterday. I think that's one. I believe there's a research that showed that internship having a significant impact on getting graduate students to stay versus to go elsewhere. So the EV department I mentioned does that. The other, sort of from a policy perspective, it is now in the comp plan, in the updated comprehensive plan for the city, that sustainability for Boulder is a good economic policy, and one of that is retaining the students that are coming out of the university. That's at a 10,000-foot level in terms of policy. Now we're going down to look at what are the areas that we could actually identify to achieve that. But most of it for the city, I think one is the internship program, and then 2, proactive engagement by EV to link the institution to the businesses that are coming up.
One of the studies that we did on college graduate retention showed that in Tallahassee, our retention rate between Florida State and Florida A&M is about 18% that we keep of the college graduates. Comparable numbers in terms of similar studies to that were done in Columbus, Ohio, Ohio State University, in Philadelphia at all of the colleges in the Philadelphia area, and in Boston and all of the colleges in that area. Their retention rates ranged from 40 to 50%. So we know we've got some work to do there from the standpoint of what we're doing in Tallahassee. The other thing that we looked at was that from the standpoint of the internships, we learned from our research that students in Tallahassee, if they are in Tallahassee and going to school at Florida State or Florida A&M, and they do an internship in Tallahassee, they are 50% more likely to stay in the community after graduation. One of the projects that we did with the Knight Creative Communities Institute year before last, or last year I guess, was a project that was aimed at that, to put together a way to get that message across to the business community that there is a way to build an internship program and to help them make the connections to the universities, career centers, to be able to make that work. They now have an online component of that that's complete, and I believe that's available on the Chamber site at the Leadership Tallahassee program, through the Leadership Tallahassee program. And in addition, what we're still looking to do, because the other part of the message that hasn't been done there, is to do a really good job of getting that message to the business community, that those tools are available to help them figure out how to build internship programs within their organizations. Because one of the things that you really have to do in order to have a really successful program is that it has to be successful not only for the business in terms of creating the additional help, but it also needs to be successful for the institution in order for them to be able to have the educational component that they're trying to achieve through an internship approach. So that's something that we're working on, but there's still work to be done in that area.
Somebody back there, and then you.
You mentioned briefly that there is a sharp increase in the amount of students using alternative transportation getting to and from class, work,
There isn't that, but they have what's called a transportation demand management that the city has as part of its transportation master plan. It really looks at, how much space do you need and what kind of incentive or disincentives do you put in place for private auto use. The university participates in that, and they have significantly increased their sort of bike facilities, for example, within CU. There's still a problem in terms of parking is still cheap there, so it encourages more students to drive, more than that we like. There is discussions with CU about the travel demand management issues, and the city does every 2 years an extensive survey, both for the CU students and then the city as a whole in terms of their travel behavior and habits, and create mitigation policies. We're looking at, it's called College Avenue within the university, a major corridor for CU because of the East Campus and the West Campus. And we're trying some innovative ideas to look at kind of a shared street as an idea where you have buses, bikes, mostly bus dedicated, but bikes and pedestrians. And one of the interesting findings from the survey is a lot of students actually use skateboards to get around, in fact, as transportation. Well, they're illegal on the street, technically. So we're trying to figure out how do we make that actually a legal way of transportation. If we can. So that's what they do, then figure out how to make it easier for them to do it. But it is a big focus, especially for the transportation department, to make it easier for CU students to use alternative transportation.
I've been given the high sign that it's time for us to stop. So
Sure.
let me stop by saying, number one, thank you for taking your time to join us this morning, and we really do appreciate it. Would ask you to keep an eye on our website and on our Facebook page to have an opportunity to keep up with what we're doing. And please join me again in welcoming Sam Assefa from Boulder.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
And just very quickly, I know that Sam has a 2 o'clock tea time this afternoon, but prior to that, he'll be available for questions, I'm sure. Thank you very much.